Brother Joe Nulliver played over 220 games, 240, I think, Joe, across five clubs and played some internationals with New Zealand and Samoa as well. But Joe, big push these days, brother, for Pacifica brothers and sisters, and I'm sure you would have done a lot of work in this space around pronunciation and having a respect to go up and talk to people about correct pronunciation and that. Is that how we pronounce your last name? How it's been pronounced over the last 20 years?
Oh, it was definitely close, but yeah, it's pronounced the Ngā Luvao, so Ngā Luvao. So
Right.
Yeah, so it's just obviously the phonetics in regards to like how we pronounce names and the vowels that are used. So it's definitely, as you mentioned, there's a push for the game and the appetite in regards to names being pronounced properly and giving it the respect that it deserves.
And so how do you go about, like, as advisors and Pacifica former players, and have you got like a body as such that represent Pacifica players, brother? To share that sort of knowledge?
Yeah, so as a recent, we've put together an advisory group. So we called the Pacifica Wellbeing Advisory Group. So it's kind of made up of different Pacifica employees that are in the game, whether they be in positions like mine or an example, Dave Solomona, who's oversees the Pacifica programs. So big push over the last few years, and I think we've got a good network across the game, but also in Clubland. So it's just basically this group that's kind of, and then on top of that, we have external people as well. So people like David Dr. Lakisa, Dr. Sierra Kyung, who've done a lot of research in this space that we've kind of lent on in regards to, in terms of informing and, whether it be the game or clubs in regards to everything that to deal with, I guess, to do with Pacifica culture and being able to educate and make aware in regards to, especially, I guess, pronunciations. So there is a body at the moment. So we're relatively young, but it's something that the game has been really pushing for. So last year, especially, we held our very first, I guess, Salanor workshop, or the equivalent of, I guess, a Yanni circle with Channel 9 last year. So I think after Origin 1 was the Thursday we held with all the executive and the head commentary team. So that was, again, a very, I guess, very first of its kind. And that's that was pretty much a platform for where we're able to kind of, give that information again off Dr. David Lakis and Dr. Sierra Kyung in regards to why it's important to pronounce names and just, again, the history of Pacifica, players and, the pioneers that come before us and, the current state of the game and where we are right now. So,
because big population, brother, in the game too of Pacifica brothers. What is the population? You do a lot of work around that space, as you said. What is the population, brother?
Yeah, I think
just to show people how important it actually is,
Yeah, so I think within the NRL, I think we, alongside Indigenous, we make up probably over 50% of the demographic of players in the NRL. And if you look at the juniors, probably higher. So so like it's, and I guess, and that's one of the reasons why we're kind of pushing this a little bit, and is that kind of makes good, like, it makes business sense. 50% of your playing employees are a certain demographic. Like it's it's best practice to make sure that obviously they feel safe and they feel valued and respected. Which is one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, nice. And the push from Pacific Islanders to Pacifica. Explain that to us, brother, because we don't know what we don't know too,
I think it's a lot of it to do, I guess, in terms of, I guess, the academic world. I think we don't lump everyone in the same in the same category. I think
Yeah,
Fijians and though they're a different group of the Pacific,
yeah,
where Samoan Tongans, like they're part of, the Fiji and they're part of the Melanesian group, where Samoa Tonga are more, again, around the Pacific. So, and then Māoris altogether, New Zealand Indigenous people, like, like you don't put them all in the same category. So
yeah,
it's just being mindful of that, and that's probably more from an academic point of view. But again, being respectful that we're not all the same. Um, Again, in years gone by, you could just lump everyone in the same category. But
yeah, brother.
and again, it's a lot of it comes down to this research um, and education around making sure that everyone is given the respect that they're due. So.
And the feedback from the players that you've sort of dealt with around their feelings around the league sort of going this way and demonstrating that respect and going out of their way to meet you guys as consultants or advisors as well. What's the feeling amongst the players as well? Like what does that give them?
Well, as I kind of mentioned, like it makes good business sense that if you're valuing and respecting your employee base, like the return on that is it's immense. And that also I guess from a club point of view and coaches, if you learn how to engage properly from a not only from a technical standpoint, but also from a psychological, emotional, and cultural standpoint, you're just going to get the best out of your players. So that's the whole reason. Like it's just not this good feeling thing that we're doing, but there is a return on investment in terms of how players are evaluated organizations, whether it be sport, corporate, or in community. If you create this environment where they belong and they, again, as I mentioned, they feel loved and feel valued, it's just you're just going to get so much more out of them. So
Yeah, definitely, brother. I love it. Tell us a little bit about your background, Joe. I met you obviously when I was down there playing juniors at Penrith when you guys went on that run and were really dominant. But tell us a little bit, like I didn't really spend much time with you either, brother, so it'd be good for me to know a little bit about who you are and where you're from, mate.
Yeah, so just a kid from South Auckland in Auckland, New Zealand. So I was born and raised in Auckland. Kind of grew up in different spots, but kind of found roots in a place called Manurewa in South Auckland. So played all my juniors there, went to school there. Samoan background. Both my parents were born in Samoa. Migrated over to New Zealand for a better life for themselves and their families. So and then pretty much all my family's from there. And then kind of found league when I was around 15. And then and it was probably around the time as well where the Warriors came in. So I think for a lot of aspiring rugby league players, having the Warriors in the NRL. Just kind of gave us a pathway in regards to actually we can, turn, what we love into a career. So played all my juniors at a club called Manurewa Marlins. So shout out to all the Rewa Hard Boys community out of Manurewa. Yes, I played all my footy, made all the rep teams. And then, as I mentioned, the Warriors came aboard. I was able to get into their pathway. Made my debut in 1998. Pretty much.
How old, brother? How old?
I was like 19, so it's fresh out of school. I was just a kid, trying to find, his way as a person, let alone a rugby league player. So and that's kind of where the journey started for me. And then spent a few years at the Warriors. Kind of struggled a little bit, I guess. Transitioning into being a professional athlete, again, for a lot of people, especially at that time, like, being a professional athlete, certainly wasn't something that you aspired to. And so it was a bit of an adjustment for me. 2001, had the opportunity to be scouted by the Panthers and came over on a trainer trial. Pretty much the rest is history. So,
So with you talked about being a professional athlete, the struggle with it. Obviously, everyone wants to play it, but once you get there, is that when the struggle began because you didn't realise everything that sort of went with playing on TV on a weekend, as well, eh?
Yeah,
Talk to us a little bit about the struggles that you sort of faced early on.
yeah. As I mentioned, like I was just a kid, when I made NRL, so I did a lot of things I had to develop in terms of just being just a person, let alone a professional athlete. So a lot of again, no, didn't have the pathway system where you were taught from from a young age, regards to being a
Yeah.
professional athlete, like they were doing here in Australia for years. So for a lot of us,
Yeah.
that was still trying to find out, just be what it means to be an elite athlete. Sorry, in an elite environment. So yeah, a lot of that kind of exposed a lot of, I guess, character flaws. Like as a kid, you just think you know it all, and
Yeah.
you just rely on your talent. So and didn't really understand a lot of what it meant to be in that position. I remember a lot of the of the, I guess, the veterans and the senior guys there. So guys like Quinton Pongia, Steve Kearney,
Mm.
Tia Ropati. So
Yeah.
that's
Legends.
even Brandy was there as well. So you heard them saying, "Oh, you got to do talk about 1%ers and hard work." But again, as a kid, you just what are you talking about? Like you're just enjoying life and not really understanding until when you're older and you realize, oh man, like these guys are, they're actually what they're saying is actually is true. So, but yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of the journey for me was again just finding out me as a person, and I think those times that I was at the Warriors, especially when I struggled, you probably learn more about yourself in adversity and learn more about yourself when you're struggling than when things are going great. And so,
Yeah.
I'm kind of grateful for those times because when it did come to Penrith, it was pretty much a last ditch effort for me to kind of revive my career, and I took all those lessons and all those a lot of the things that those senior boys had said in the past, and said I have to put that into practice. So yeah,
Yeah. Who'd you lean on to take that next step, brother? And who do you credit that sort of stuff to as well? Like taking the next step and prolonging your career and then turning it into a 200 plus game career.
obviously my family, like I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for my family and believing me,
Yeah.
unconditional love and support that that comes with being with a really strong family. So my sisters and my in-laws as well were a big part of that. Obviously my wife, my kids too, and I really when I came over to Penrith, it was literally me, my wife, and my daughter, who was, I think she would have just been one. And
Yeah.
so we never lived outside of Auckland, so to come over new country, a place like Penrith, like all we knew was South Auckland. So I let heavily on my wife at the time, and we were pretty much each other's support network, and it was hard
Yeah.
because we had no family, and then on top of that, once we got some friends in that as around. Like I was pretty fortunate that I knew Tony Purutua and the Purutua boys. Sorry, both Frank and Tony. We played JK together and came through the rep system as well. So I kind of knew them, so that was made I guess that transition a little bit easier. And then their family were a big support for us as well. So
Yeah.
really
JK, you mean in Junior Kiwis, eh? For the people
that's correct. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
So, talk to me a little bit about South Auckland because it's got a bit of a reputation as being a tough place to grow up, brother. What was it like growing up?
Yeah, like, I guess there's always a perception, and people always probably reference, once we're Warriors, and there's definitely elements of that, but for me, it's just home, like just like I guess anywhere you live, whether it be in Sydney or you live in Hawaii, there's going to be pockets of and places in those areas where it's tough, but for me it was home, and I still call it home. I was back there like a couple of weeks ago, so nothing's changed there, but you know, you just, but yeah, definitely has a reputation, and like, yeah, kind of made you a bit more, I guess, streetwise in terms of, and especially kind of how I kind of grew up as well. It was just me and the boys, and like we just had to fend for ourselves, and there's probably some things that you're probably not proud of, doing, but it makes you a better person. So yeah.
As a kid, though, did you feel like you had to, stand up, or you got run over in a place like South Auckland, brother?
Yeah.
Like, did you have to knuckle up to sort of get through early on and show that you weren't going to back down from anyone, or were you the sort of kid that sort of shied away from? Because you were pretty placid when I met you.
Yeah, I'm a totally different person than I am now than I was back then. Yeah, no, I guess that comes with maturity, and I was definitely a ratbag growing up, and just doing the things that all kind of young, stupid young men do, and trying to be the man, and and I was still doing it too, even when I made my debut. I remember not my debut. I remember I got my first game in senior game in reserve grade, and I was coming out of our 18s, and I was like 17. I remember playing that game, and then like it was an awesome experience, only to go to a party that night and get into a massive fight, and again, you're not, you're oblivious to consequences, you just think that you're bulletproof, and and on top of that, you just, like you're playing in the seniors, so you think you're the man, and so just looking back at it, I was just going, man, I cringe, because I was an idiot, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. So your NRL career, you played I think you played about 240, it says, just doing a little bit on Wiki and in a couple of sites, but you played for the Warriors, Panthers, South Para, and Manly. You won premierships at Penrith in 2003 and Manly in 2011, I think. Of all those games and across all those clubs, brother, the person that you are, you're always, welcoming. You're making people feel like they're part of something. I found you were one of the players in the top grade that took the time out, to come and chat to the young ones. And I know how everyone felt when you guys were around, you and Presto and Scotty Sats, and just good people to be around. How do you adapt to all of those clubs? And did you have a favourite place, or were you just fit into all five of them like you would Warriors early on?
I think a lot of how I guess conducted myself, especially when I came out to Australia, was like a lot of my experiences, and just I guess a lot of attribute that to my family, just being a good person. And my dad always pressed on us, say, listen, just just be a good person, and everything else will flow from that. And I'm big on relationships as well. So for me, and I was just trying to be an example of of the players that were doing that for me when I was younger. They took me aside, they had the time to correct me when I was wrong, or comfort me when when I was was having a really bad day. So for me, those players that gone before me, and again, like the Kuntapongi's and Stephen Kearney's and those guys, that I was just taking their lead. So for me, I was just saying, well, like again, together with how I grew up, I just said, I just want to be the best person I can be. Did I do that perfectly? Definitely not. But I aspired to be that person. That if I could just be that, everything else would I guess you can build off the back of that. So so I made every club that I went to, I've still got great relationships with people that at all those clubs, and again, that's I like to think that's a testament of the I guess all the values that my family and players exampled in my life. So
yeah, definitely, brother. You were sort of you treat people the way you want to be treated. You were the epitome of that. You know what I mean? Like if you look up dictionary and try and find that, I reckon they'd find your face there. You know what I mean? And that's how you made people feel. So I thought that. I thought that across all clubs, it'd be no different to you because you treated people the way you want to be treated, and you would have got that back in returns for sure, brother.
Yeah, and
Across the five.
sorry,
Sorry, brother. Yeah.
I was just saying on top of that, like, I learned early on too that, rugby league's a roller coaster, that
Yeah.
you can, be in the highs one time and then, be down on the lows. And, for me, like, I had to kind of, find a happy medium for myself and, and get off that roller coaster that was, was rugby league, let alone life, So for that happy medium for me was hey, listen, just do my very best and be the very best person I can be, and that's, so for me, what that did for me was that, regardless of the jersey I was given, and I'll give that jersey 100%. So whether I'm playing first grade or get dropped, having that happy medium for me was that, obviously, of course, you want to play first grade and, you want to be successful, but, that's just not how life goes. So for me, I was if I can get off this roller coaster, so what's the I guess the happy medium for me, and that was just being my very best in terms of how I applied myself, training and work, but also being a good person. So.
Yeah. Across the 5 clubs, Joe, where do you reckon you played your best footy, brother?
Obviously, the places where I was successful, like in big premierships, but they're all unique places, I guess. The clubs that, especially when I went to, and we're struggling. That was obviously, a lot of to do with me in terms of my application as well, but also to the clubs were rebuilding as well. So I remember going to South after going from Penrith, like they were just kind of rebuilding as well. And, I think that kind of reminded me actually of the Tigers right now.
Right.
Yeah, but, my performances, I guess, and how I trained was, I guess, a reflection of that. Even, it shouldn't be that way, but that's just how I looked at it and I saw it. But then I think once they started turning the corner, and obviously when Russell Crowe took over and they really started doing things, I guess, off the field, and then just seeing how that reflected on the field, like that's probably an example of that. And then when I went to Paris, the same thing. Like I went there, they were rebuilding, and then I was there for a bit, and in and out of first grade. Then in 2009, we were in the grand final. So and we lost that grand final against Melbourne that year. So my definitely was clubs were the clubs that won premierships there. They definitely was probably where I played my best football. But that's just the clubs there. I didn't have good times there as well. So.
With the premiership sides, you talked a little bit about the Tigers, right? I want to focus on that because you probably go and win premierships because you got confidence. And it's the sides like Para and South you mentioned were rebuilding, and you go in there, and you touched on it a little bit, but the expectation for people that are watching the Tigers and the sides that are in a bit of a slump now, how do you get out of that sort of slump when, like you just mentioned, then you sort of touched on, it feels like it's ingrained, like that's the culture, that's the norm day to day. So what does it take to get out of that sort of stuff? Because you've been at clubs that have won premierships as well, brother. So what did you notice was the biggest difference? And if you had any advice for any young coaches or players, young leaders, aspiring leaders, what advice would you give them to make positive contribution to lifting expectations and performance of people around you?
That's an hour-long conversation right there. But I guess and I spent time at the Tigers too. So it's a difficult one. And again, and like the way I look at it is this, culture is, it's you got to play the long game, and it's something that you don't just get overnight, and you can only buy so many players, and for success. But sustainability, it has to be ingrained in, but it's also a reflection of your leaders there. So, and this
Yeah.
is not a knock at anyone whatsoever, but again, based on my own experiences and what I've the organizations that I've been a part of that were successful was a reflection of who their leaders were. And again, that's complex in itself, but culture is it's value based. It's driven by obviously your leaders, and it's lived up by your leaders, and that's integrity as well. And but yeah, and then you got to create a system that's sustainable. So when I came here to Penrith, it reminded me so much when I was at Manly, and where they had all their juniors that come through in the same pathway. There's not many players or not many teams at the time when I especially went to Manly that could say their top 17 had been in the club 10 years or more. And that's it's very rare these days. But you look at Penrith and the players that they've come through here, they've been together since they died. So that value system. Then on top of that, the technical aspect, the system that they've developed here, and that's how that's aligned right down from the bottom all the way to the top. They've played the long game, and they're kind of reaping the benefits of that now. And so, clubs like Tigers and good example. They're probably the best. Probably in the off season, they'll probably spent the most in terms of or recruited the best. I would think out of the players that they got there, amongst, doggies as well. But their performances haven't reflected that. So it just goes to my point is that you can only buy so much. You can't buy culture. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But that's the long game. Look at Melbourne Storm. They've been doing what they were doing for 20 plus years. So and look,
and regardless of who comes in there, Joe,
100%.
They just fit in.
Yeah,
they just fit in, don't they?
Yeah, so that's Panthers are in that mode now. That's create a system here where again guys like Hoskins and Garner, it helps them flourish. So there's a psychological and emotional aspect of a club that again from my own experience and regardless be sport, corporate, and that you have to create the environment for players and your employees to flourish. So like I said, it's a lot more complex and a lot more again, this is an hour-long conversation, but based on my experiences and the clubs that I've been a part of and organizations and the teams that I've been a part of, you can create that environment, but again, it's the long game. You have to. That's how you create culture. And there are exceptions to the rules, 100%. But just those clubs that I've kind of mentioned, Manly back in those 2000s, and even like I said, that's Melbourne. That was Melbourne way back then. And the guys that come through, Craig, what Craig at his disposal, the Billy Slater, Cooper Cronks, and Cam Smith. Again, when I was at Manly, he had the Stewart boys, Steve Maddise, Jamie Lyon. But then we look at here in terms of the reflection here. Oh, sorry, the personnel they got here. Yeah, you got the Yowies, the Nathan Clearys, the Luais, and they've lost a lot. They've lost literally pretty much a team, over the last 2 years. But the system that they've got here, it's pretty impressive.
90, I reckon too, Joe. 90% of the players are trial in juniors because it's not open trials like a lot of other clubs.
Yeah.
They're all junior base, say Penrith junior base.
Yeah, so they got
trial as well.
Yeah, they got a built within mentality here. So all the juniors that come through, they're obviously recruited by the great Jim Jones and his team. He's been recruiting here since the Stone Ages. So his foot, all the players that have come through here, he's pretty much had his I guess footprint in terms of those players. So. It starts from our recruitment from our juniors, but again, the alignment of the values, alignment of how Panthers play, how they conduct themselves, it goes all the way down to our juniors. So again, just makes sense in terms of how they progress up the chain, and like, you're getting players that are, had been in a system that is successful. Last year, one flag, one cup, one SG ball, literally a game away from winning mats, obviously won NRL, won the state championship. So, so when you got that environment where it's, it's not only winning, but it's again the psychology of winning. That's the expectation. So when players come into the system, I'm expected to give my best. I'm expected to win. So there's a lot of that.
Speaking of psychology of winning, I want to take a step back to your upbringing in South Auckland, and you talked about opportunities that sort of came up. All Blacks. Did everyone want to be an All Black in New Zealand, brother? And it was unrealistic. It was unrealistic to try and sort of think that. There would have obviously been a top competition for rugby union, but did you all play rugby union as well? We're going off perceptions again, but did you all play rugby union as juniors and all want to be Wallabies, All Blacks, brother?
Yeah, like before the Warriors came, it was just rugby. And I didn't even hear about league until like the 90s. So again, I was there when they held '87 World Cup and we won it there. So that feeling, as a young kid, you just, I wanted to be John Kirwan, and then I wanted to be the Iceman Michael Jones. So he was like, he was my, for lack of a better word, idol, growing up, Michael Jones. So everyone wanted to be All Black, and I played rugby growing up. But I think it's equivalent of going, living in the eastern suburbs, and then you move out west where, the east suburbs predominantly play rugby, and then you move out, west, it's rugby league. It's pretty much the same. I grew up in the area where when I was younger playing rugby, then when I moved out south to Manadero, South Auckland, everyone played league. So so that's kind of how that conversation, that's kind of how I was introduced to rugby league. And then I remember my friends at the time said, "Hey, you want to come play league?" And I was going, "What's that?" And then just fell in love with it. I just loved it, and obviously still aspired to play rugby. But just wasn't, my calling. So
hobbies, brother. Hobbies away from the footy. I know you like your music and that a little bit too, eh? And your wife was singing when you were playing, brother. She's still getting around singing?
She's still a muso, so she still sings. And obviously, like you mentioned, love music. At school, studied music purely just to wear classes, go into music the boys. So that was probably my only. I love music. Still do. I guess now these days it's just spending time with the kids. So that's pretty much my hobbies now, and obviously alongside work. So
You play golf or anything, Joe?
Not a golfer, bro.
Too boring for you, eh?
Oh, I can't stand it.
What about away from footy, brother? If you didn't make a career out of footy, what would you have been, you reckon?
Man, I know everyone's gonna laugh, but actually, I wish I was a dancer, just I don't know, probably because just the environment I kind of grew up, everyone danced and being creative, all that type of stuff. But I know probably my wife's probably going to watch this, and my kids going to watch this. They roll their eyes, But I'll just that's probably one thing that I wish I would have learned. So just don't have
and what about?
Don't have the I guess the moves for it. I guess or the mobility.
How many kids you got these days, Joe? What sort of dad are you, brother?
You probably have to ask my kids that. I just got 2 kids, so both have left school. I'm actually 3 months away from being a granddad. So Yeah, so
Yeah, nice.
yeah, pumped about that. So me and my wife are, been dreaming for years about what's the next step for us now that the kids are, so yeah, so we got one little grandchild on the way. But no, my like I said, my son's in the ball and he's left school, so he's kind of on his journey. And my daughter's she's working and and her partner expecting their first child. So yeah,
Nice.
Mm.
What sort of dad are you with the young fella? Footy. I find it hard, because I always harp on with the young ones that we don't see any footballers down at the park playing or practicing their craft anymore, But I think a lot of young fellas watch footy and think that they can go out and emulate that rather than back in the day you worked hard and you're at the park from sun up to sundown. Different world these days, but how are you with your young fella, brother?
Yeah, I try to be I'll just kind of let him do his thing, when he asks for advice, I'll give it. But, doesn't work all the time, usually kind of after games and stuff and that, but he usually tries to avoid me, so. But I try to be obviously a supportive as any parent would be. He's on his journey and like all young fellas, and like I said, I was probably the same when I was his age as well. Last thing you want to hear is hear from your old man. But it's sometimes it's funny because it's kind of like that teacher scenario. He'll come up to you and say, "Oh, man, coach said this," and I was going, "Oh, yes, son, I've been saying that to you for the last 3 weeks." But but like it's important, that I take a step back as well, especially when it comes to football, and it's even harder still that I actually work for the Panthers and that. So and just I guess the expectations as well, and things that we've kind of discussed. Obviously, having our last name, plays a big part in it, and the expectations of that, and I try and be as supportive as I can, and not say like that, like just control what you can control. But it's hard when when there's noise all over the place. It's social media plays a big part too in young people's lives these days. So we try and keep them grounded as possible, and I try to lead by example as well.
Brother.
No, yeah. So it's a bit of a it's beautiful but awkward at the same time. So
talk to us a little bit about your role there at the Panthers before we leave you.
Yeah, so I'm in our wellbeing space. So big part of it is about supporting our players psychologically and emotionally, but also providing them opportunities around career opportunities, and so whether it be through university or vocational, like TAFE and that, employment as well. So a big part of that. A lot of the support off the field, I guess. So, as I mentioned, a lot of our players, obviously, they're not immune to life, and if anything, like it's probably a lot more going on in their lives, additional to the pressures of being in the NRL system. So it's just making sure that our players are are doing well. And big part around the research now that we have is with players engaged with things off the field, makes them more rounded player on the field. So we're trying to again, rugby league is just a small snapshot of their lives. So just making them give them that, I guess, big perspective, and then and that again, statistically, not everyone's going to make it. My son included. So it's making sure that they prepare for that emotionally, psychologically, but then how that transition works out, that they it's they do it well.
So is that like needs based, Joe? Do you wait for them to sort of come to you and seek you out and ask you who you sort of got in community that can help in different ways, or do you guys encourage them to study something at TAFE or uni for long term?
Yeah, it's definitely needs based. So we obviously run workshops and mandatory workshops, and saying which is part of our compliance as a club and to the NRL. But then off the back of that, we hold one-on-one meetings with players. So that's kind of where we kind of have those really in-depth discussions with regards to, where are you emotionally, psychologically, where are you in terms of your career, how can we resource you, how can we support you, and then then start them on their journey that way. So definitely needs-based. Not everyone's gonna want to be a teacher or be in a trade. So what's the next step? What is again being? I know what it's like to be young, man. I didn't even know what if it wasn't football, I wouldn't have known what to do. When I was younger. So it's having that empathy and having that understanding, and then on that journey with them of discovery. So
bro. Best you played with?
Best? Nah, that's the worst question people ask me. Oh man, there's just too many. Like, man, I mentioned, like, just coming through the grades. Someone sent me a game we played against Melbourne. That was my second NRL game. And Stacey Jones was there. Like you play these type of players. And then. Then obviously I mentioned the Platoon boys here, and then Presto, like you just literally can't put them on it. And then, as I mentioned, Manly, Stuart boys, Steve Matai, Jamie Lyon, like Matty Ballin, like the list goes on. And then when I was at Para, Jared Haynes,
you were there for 09, eh?
Nathan Highmarsh, and then like Luke Burt, like even Daniel Wagon, and like all these players. You just then that's not even against players that you played against. I'm a Raiders fan, bro. Like I've been a Raiders fan from obviously from the 90s. So when
who was your favorite player growing up? Yeah, from there.
Bradley Clyde. So Michael Jones was for rugby, but Bradley Clyde for me, he was my guy. So, and then obviously followed the Raiders, and purely because obviously Bradley Clyde, but then you had Mel Meninga, like over Queensland, so like it was Noah Nandruku, like Brett Mullen, right? Like again, when Rubes went there, like that was game over. Like when Ruben Wiki, especially for a lot of us coming through the grades, he was probably our first bona fide Pacifica superstar, and when he came into grade, all of us in the at lunchtime, trying to put on hats and just like Rubes did. And then I got to play with him at the Kiwis as well. So like there's just too many players. Like, and then obviously here Penrith, with Gowie and Marlon Lang and Trent Waterhouse, like man, there's just too many players, bro. So
was there a player that you're worried about during the week leading up to a game on the weekend? Who was the best that you sort of played against in your position? Someone that marked you?
I remember coming through the grades, and I was at the Warriors, and we're playing against Brisbane, and I was playing centre. I had to mark up against Tony Carroll. I was crapping my pants, man. Like I was really like, man, I was going, please don't run at me, please don't run at me. Like that's not even like you think about the players that they hit then. Like man, it was just Shane Webke, and he was on the bench, and they had like all the senior boys there, and then like Brad Thorne, he was there, like, and then Lockie was there. Like remember a game that we played against St. George. I was playing fullback. Nathan Blacklock was playing fullback. He made a break, and I was obviously the last line of defense. He literally like in and away, and I went to dive, just to make it out like I was close to him, but I dived, and he was like 20 meters away from me. Bro, it was pathetic, but just. And then Choc was playing there as well, so Anthony Mardine. So like it's just, like it just blows your mind, like those type of players that you played against, and and obviously, Joey Johns, like that Newcastle pack, like Steve Simpson, like just put the fear of God to you when you were playing against those. And then the Dogs of War too, the 90s, like man, Cement Collective, those guys, and
how was Gordy to play against? Was he like aggressive as?
Yeah, like he hated to play against those type of dudes. just them looking at you, you just go like you just want to look away. Hey, let's what are we doing after the game? You know, those type of things. It was like you just like especially when you're a young fella coming into grade, like you just go, you're either starstruck or you're starstruck. Second of all, you just can't believe that you're playing NRL, and then and third, you just get out of your wits. It's either make a mistake or just stuff up, and so it's coming into grade. It's a whole heap of emotions in that. So
what about the best that never went on to play NRL? Any brothers that you grew up with in Auckland, brother, that you feel could have made it, but they made the wrong choices?
I won't name them, but a lot of the guys that I kind of played footy with coming up through Auckland's, there's through Auckland competition, there's definitely a few. And like, man, I was never the most talented player, like I can name a dozen, and all the guys that hopefully I played with or are listening to this probably the same. You go, oh yeah, this player, like we're 10 times the top I was, and call it luck, and one thing that I always, especially when I was younger, like I just wanted to work hard, and was that got me through? Maybe, but there's definitely I was definitely wasn't the most talented player coming through. So, but there are just for respect, I won't name players, but
right. I played with and played against Marcus Perinara when he was younger. Remember Marcus? Yeah. He was a player that I thought would have went on and done big things as well. And then he came up Newcastle and played local league here with us at Central Charlestown. But for me, one of the players that I thought from New Zealand played New Zealand 16s, and they came and played us when we won the comp in Harold Mats at the Knights. And he was a year younger than us, and he gave us a bath as a half, And then went to Parramatta, obviously won a reserve grade comp there at Parramatta, but just disappeared, But someone like that, I looked at and thought he would have went on and had a massive career and done big things, and even represented New Zealand. He was that good.
Yeah. Man, like but it's a tough one, because you don't there's definitely a lot that plays into being an NRL player or aspiring to be one. A lot of things have got to fall in line in order for that to happen, and and then people don't realize that just life happens. There's things, just things that come up, and that just kind of for some guys that just hits them. So but all the players that I've again, that all the boys I know, I mentioned that they probably can look at the screen and go, 100% they could, if they had the opportunity, they would definitely have been fortunate to have a career like mine. So
best bit of advice you were given, brother, and who gave it to you?
Would have been my brother-in-law. So I've got 5 sisters. I'm the only boy, so having a lot of estrogen in the house, was interesting. But my brother-in-law, he was he was kind of like a real big brother to me, and especially at a time in my life where I really needed one, and needed someone to kind of, as I mentioned, like I just had a lot of girls in my life, and obviously my dad there, and it was not so much his advice, but just his example. Just the things he did. Like he played rugby. For me, I love rugby when I was growing up. So seeing him, train, he was. I remember he was doing night shifts, and after his night shifts, he'll go and train after night shift, and this is like early hours in the morning. And I was seeing him do hills or run. I was going, it just blew my mind that someone had this level of commitment. And so for me, like that was, and then just having that assurance of of another male role model, loving on you and caring for you and taking you to places, So a big part of that, I could definitely attribute to him. So I guess, obviously he didn't really say much, but by his example for me, how that translated was just working hard. Like he's no other. If you want to do something, people always say, "What's the magic formula?" There's no other thing to know than just working hard and knowing your value, who you are as a person. I think there's a lot of work that you got to do personally as well. Especially like as I mentioned earlier on the talk, a lot of things when I was growing up that I had a lot of character flaws, still do. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at all, but it's being aware of that and doing the work in order to be a better person.
Yeah.
That's a massive help. And unfortunately for me, I learned that later on in life. I wish I kind of learned it earlier.
Yeah.
But again, it's the journey of a young person too, in terms of their development. But no, that's probably all the advice I could give, really. So
Yeah. Awesome. And before we let you go, 3 people that you would invite to dinner, brother. Give us a little bit of a reflection of, people you looked up to, whether it be movie stars or people in your community or within your family. If you had 3 spots at the dinner table, who would get the spots, brother?
I'll try not to be emotional about this. I only want to be one. For me, maybe 3. It's just my mum passed away when I was 7 years old. So if there was one person that I would love to have dinner again with, then that'll be my mum. So yeah, hope that
Yeah,
answers that.
beautiful, brother.
Mm.
Well, appreciate your time, Joe.
Awesome.
Might see you around again soon, brother. But thanks for coming on and keep doing what you're doing, eh?
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. All the best, day.
All right. Thanks a lot, brother.
Take care, man. Soup.
Talk soon. All right. Joe, while we still got you, what your correct pronunciation of your last name?
So it's nga lu vowel. So nga, so G is pronounced like in singer, the G
Yeah.
in singer. So if you can
Nga,
nga, yep. And then
nga,
so nga a. So how we
nga,
pronounce our vowels, if you could get our vowels right, so a, e, I, o, u. So nga lu vowel.
nga, lu, vowel,
Vowel.
vowel, vowel.
Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome, brother. Thanks
Awesome.
again for coming on.
Thanks, Johnny. Take care, brother.
Super. So, obviously, have a little bit of a yarn about the footy as well, as promised. One of the good guys there, though. I love being around Joe. When I was at Penrith, he was one of those guys that he just gave everyone his time. So placid, and he was like what our grandparents or our parents taught us to be. Treat people the way you want to be treated. He was the epitome of it all. Yeah, so it's good to have you on, brother, after all these years. But I mean, the footy. Oh, Jesus. Tigers are in trouble, obviously. Um, uh, the Knights up and down. Let me have a quick look at the ladder before I let you go. Obviously, Roosters and Penrith started a little bit slow, but starting at their stride. Even Melbourne starting to come into their own. And Roosters were the same. They started slow, but they're starting to get a bit of form. But then now they bumped into Melbourne, and Melbourne gave them a bit of a bath the other day. I wouldn't have thought that because we went down and watched Melbourne round 1 against Parramatta, and they didn't look crash shot. So to see Melbourne sort of come on as well has been pretty good to watch. I think Parramatta's been unlucky. Parramatta been playing a lot of the good sides, so I reckon they'll go all right. My old Broncos been flying, but then Canberra put them in their place the other day. It's been good to see. Like we talked last year a little bit about the Warriors. The Warriors been inconsistent. They got all that talent over there, and they sort of never measure up and never make a run to the finals. But I reckon they got chemistry there this year to do that. I reckon that they could make a run to the finals this year. The Knights are hitting a bit of form as well. They're playing a bit of good footy without Kalen Ponga, so when he comes back, they'll be a lot better. Panthers obviously, starting to hit their stride. They got beat round 1 by the Bronx. They got beat in the World Club Challenge, but ever since, they've been flying, the Panthers. Bunnies obviously up there as well. Cronulla, Nico Owens made a massive difference again to them. But Brado Trindle, when he was there, he didn't miss a beat either. So I think talked a little bit about this last year, but you got sides like Canterbury and Tigers who are struggling for a bit of direction. I said last year that if I was them, I would have went out and got someone like Brado or Scott Drinkwater. Obviously, Scott Drinkwater's signed now long term up at the Cowboys, but that was when he was sort of on the outer and Hammer was starting and he was playing Q Cup or come off the bench, you know. So Brado plays that role now at Cronulla, but I believe he's a genuine starting half in the competition. So maybe he'll get tapped on the shoulder throughout the year, hopefully. But obviously he's signed for a couple of years at the Sharkies as well. So that'll be a decision he'll have to sort of make. But I reckon that the decision will be forced upon him because these other guys that are struggling, like Tigers and Bulldogs, as I mentioned, their halves that they've got coming through, I don't think they're going to measure up. They bought that young fella from the Broncos who wasn't allowed to go to the Dolphins. So he went down to the Bulldogs. He's Australian schoolboy half. So I don't know how long they'll sort of persevere with Flanagan before they give that young fella a crack. But apparently he goes pretty good. So I would imagine that it won't be long before they give him a crack. And then obviously the Dolphins are going pretty well as well. Like no one sort of imagined that they'd be in the top four, sitting on 4 wins, 2 losses. So pretty even comp. Warriors are in 5th. Even the Titans sneak under the radar. They play a little bit of good footy as they did on the weekend against St. George, who've been hot and cold again. Pretty inconsistent, but I think the biggest disappointment for a lot of people has been the Cowboys, considering what they did last year. 1 game away, I think, or even, I don't know, they nearly made the grand final there anyway, but they have been very, very disappointing. So be interesting to see what happens with those guys across the next month. But I guess for me, seeing Brisbane go as good as they have has been refreshing because I think they went through the stage that the Tigers are going through now a few years back with all them young fellas that were coming through and they were getting smacked. So if the fellas at the Tigers and the Dogs sort of stick together like Joe was talking about and they build a culture from within, they'll see the success that the Bronx are having early on. Hopefully that the Bronx can sort of sustain that throughout the year and make a run to the finals. Obviously, it's a long way away, but it's just good to see them throw the ball around. Love the brand of footy the Roosters play as well with them young halves. They just test defences right across the park. You can't sleep because they'll go from one side, one tackle, and then they'll come back and test you right across on the other edge. The next, they're really good. I think that they'll be really good towards the back end of the year. Joey Manu come back, played his first game the other day, so they'll only get stronger and stronger. I think it's hard to make a prediction this far out, but I reckon the top sort of 4 will be Bronx, Panthers, Roosters, Storm. I think they've got the measure of the Rabbitohs at the moment. I think Rabbitohs are just outside that, and I reckon the Warriors will make a run this year and play finals. So might next week we'll just dedicate our show next week to just having a look at the footy because all the junior league starts next week, obviously. So we'll talk a little bit about all the junior league and that coming back. Semi-finals are on for junior reps this weekend. So good luck to everyone playing in the semis this week for junior reps. All the Knights juniors. I think they're in all Mats, SG Ball, Tarsha Gale. So good luck to all you guys. Go out and get them. And we'll dedicate our show next week to just sitting down and having a yarn about footy rather than interviewing any personalities. And then we'll look at changing it up throughout the year again. But I haven't spoken about footy this year. I haven't looked at any videos, so I really enjoyed that side of it last year. So we'll get back to that next week. If anyone wants to come on and co-host, let me know. We'll get you in on the stream as well, and we'll have a yarn from a distance. Jump on, shoot me a message, and let me know, and I'll get you in next week, and we'll sit down and have a yarn. Just make sure you watch a couple of the games so you can sort of chat to a couple of the games as well. But look forward to next week. Thanks again to Joey Nalaval. We'll try and get that right, but it's good to talk to him as well about perspective from Pacifica and people and the advisory body that they got in place to sort of speak on their behalf too. It's all about inclusion and people feeling valued and feel like they belong to something. So it was good to talk to Joe about his perspective on that sort of stuff and the stuff he's doing in his space, but also getting him to wind back the clock and go down memory lane and think about where he came from in South Auckland to where he ended up with 2 premierships and 240 games later. So thanks again to Brother Joe. Appreciate your time. And thank you guys for watching. And I know it's a bit of a mixed bag with a 10 a.m. start, but school holidays, work at a school obviously, so it's better to do it any time, whatever suits those guys. So got Joe this morning. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next week for episode 9. Thank you, guys. I'm Shawnee Skewthorpe, your host. I don't say that, so maybe I need to start that. A lot of people probably wouldn't know my name that come in, but I'm Sean Skewthorpe, your host, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you.